it is. Ring that bell.
Yes.
Time.
We have made it, Bill. Here we go. Not long ago, in fact, it was March 6th, to be exact, a guy who played an important role in the music business left us. His name is Lou Ottens, and in the early 1960s, he was a guy who helped invent, or he did invent, the cassette tape. For me, I started buying albums, and I'm talking about actual albums, LPs, in the late 1960s, and vinyl was what I bought pretty regularly all through the 70s and 80s. I never owned an 8-track player, I'm happy to say, never any 8-track tapes because they were awful. I did discover cassettes, though, in the early 70s, and I occasionally bought some of those. In fact, I got to tell you, the first couple that I bought in 1973 or 74 were by Mott the Hoople, the great Ian Hunter band, one of them entitled Mott, the other one entitled The Hoople. Mott had the hit All the Way from Memphis on it. The Hoople had a great song in there called Roll Away the Stone. I was a big fan of Mott the Hoople and Ian Hunter. Anyway, over the years, I didn't buy too many pre-recorded cassettes, just maybe a dozen to 2 dozen, but I did buy hundreds of blank cassettes over the years to make compilation cassettes. And what I would do is I would, just put a bunch of songs together, put them on a tape, and I did that from the mid-70s through the early 90s. Things like this one, 31 pop favorites, double shots of rock. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah. Modern Rock, 1993, 1994. That was one of the last ones I made. Chet's Party Tape, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And believe it or not, Bill, when I was 20 years old, I actually put out a cassette of my own. I am not kidding you. Some covers and some tunes I actually wrote myself, including a couple of big hits. Well, in my mind, they were big hits. One was called Bicentennial Bullfrog, the other Table Hockey Wizard. The cassette was called Fantasy Child, Jim Chesko. And that's a picture of me as a kid, but I actually did this when I was 20. I had a lot of issues. Anyway, my original point, Lou Ottens, who invented the cassette and was also helpful in pioneering the compact disc in the late 70s and early 80s. He died at the age of 94. So rest in peace, Mr. Lou Ottens.
I'm devastated. I'm devastated to hear that you didn't own an 8-track. Who didn't own an 8-track?
I never did. I somehow managed to avoid it. But when I was, driving around with pals in the mid-1970s, when we first got our licenses, we were able to drive. Some of them did have 8-tracks in the car, and you'd be right into a great song, and then you get that click, and the thing has to change to the next track. I hated 8-tracks, and I'm glad I never had one. Oh, but you know what? With the cassettes, the funny thing was they would occasionally jam up, and so you'd have to get the pencil out and fix them. So the pencils are in mourning too for Mr. Lou Ottens, who left us.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Chet, I think we need to actually figure out how to do this. We need to play a little bit of that Chesko tape you put together.
Yeah.
We need
Fantasy
to
Child.
All about Fantasy Child.
And I actually did have a couple of several original songs. Table Hockey Wizard, of course, to the theme of Pinball Wizard, is about a buddy of mine who always beat me in table hockey. And Bicentennial Bullfrog, which I wrote in 1976 for the bicentennial. And my friends knew about this, and they would occasionally ask me to sing it. We had a strange life growing up.
Yeah.